Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Hello, hello, hello. Excuse me. And welcome to another edition of the Beauty in Us Radio right here on Awesome God Radio. I am your host, Nelson E. Brown, and I'm very glad that you all had the opportunity to come and sit down for another show this evening. I'm very excited to talk about tonight's subject. We're talking about the book of Esther in the Bible. So that's what we're going to be talking about this evening. That's what we're going to be talking about in terms of the subject matter. We're going to be talking a lot more about courage and bravery and what that looks like and what that feels like. So the story of Esther, we're going to examine that thoroughly so that we can learn more about what it means to be assertive and stand up for ourselves, what it means to stand up for ourselves in this context, and even through different aspects of our lives, what that looks like and what that feels like. But before we begin, I want to let you all know that it is a new month. Today is November 2nd, 2021. We're right now, we're really deep into the fall season, and we are really in that holiday season mode now. I hope you all enjoyed your Halloween. I saw a lot of interesting costumes. Some of my friends and some of the people who follow my work, they really put together their costumes really well. So Halloween was this past Sunday. So I hope everybody enjoyed their Halloween. I've been watching a lot of Halloween movies, and I've been and just enjoying everybody's costumes that they put together. They've really blown me away. I can say that. I think that's safe to say. But again, now we're into the holiday season. In a few weeks, it will be Thanksgiving, and then December will be here, and then it will be Christmas, and then before you know it, we'll all be saying Happy New Year to 2022. But aside from that, I still wanted to let you all know that I still have a few more guests that are going to appear on my broadcast for the month of November and for the month of December before we close out. I will not be airing my show on November 23rd this month. So I'm going to have guests for November 9th and November 16th and probably November 30th. So I will keep you guys posted and updated about that. But I want to let you all know that I definitely, again, I appreciate you all for every single show that you've been a part of, everything that you all have said, all of the blessings, all of the prayers, all of the support. It doesn't go unnoticed, and I don't take it for granted at all. I wanted to talk about the book of Esther, so I wanted to jump right into that. But I want to let you all know that I'll be using my glasses for reading. I think that there's a glare that shows up every time I put my glasses on. So I think that there's a glare from the screen that shows up when I put my glasses on, but I'm just going to be using it to read out of the Bible. So please ignore the glare, if you see it, but I'm using it to read, out of this passage. So again, we're talking about the book of Esther. We're talking about what it means to be assertive and what it means to stand up for ourselves. So when we talk about the book of Esther, we have to remember that Esther was a part of the Bible. She has one book in the Bible, and she's not really mentioned in any other portion of the Bible, but I think that Esther is someone in the Bible that I think should be admired for her bravery and for her coming of age. In this book, she is described as being a beautiful Jewish girl who King Xerxes in the Bible chose to be his queen. And when Haman, which is King Xerxes' right-hand man, when he plotted to murder all of the Jews, Queen Esther's cousin Mordecai persuaded her to try to save her people because of her position of authority. And she takes a lot of risks, and she appealed to the king and rescued the Jews, in the long run. But we're going to take a look at what exactly happened throughout the course of this passage. And although the name of God doesn't appear in this book at all, I think that it's important for us to understand that his care for his chosen people is shown clearly. throughout the course of this passage. And I think that the great story of the rescue of the Jews is celebrated annually during the Feast of Purim, at which time the book of Esther is read out loud. So I think that, again, since God is not mentioned in any part of this passage, I still think it's important for us to remember and to recognize, I should say, the impact that Esther had on her people with her position of authority. But we're going to read the book of Esther. We're going to talk about the story of Esther. And I think that it'll give everybody a better understanding of who she is and how important she is in the Bible. And when we talk about assertiveness and when we talk about using our positions of authority in order to bless the people that we love and care about, and also to make a difference, I think that it's important for us to understand that she's that role model and example of what we should do and how we should carry ourselves, even though God calls us into things that we may not understand. He may appoint us to positions in our lives, not just in school or in work or in any setting. If God appoints us to certain positions in our lives, and when He gives us responsibilities and when He calls us to do things, I think that it's important for us to use the gifts that He's given us well. I think it's important for us to understand why He's called us to where He's called us, why He wants us to use our positions accordingly in order to uplift others, in order to make a difference or to make an impact. So I think that that's what we're going to figure out once we come out on the other side of this passage. So I want you all to just sit back and enjoy. I'm going to read the book of Esther, but we're going to talk about it and unpack each and every portion of this book. So let's see. Okay, so this is what happened during the time of Xerxes. The Xerxes, who ruled over 127 provinces, stretching from India to Kush. At that time, King Xerxes reigned from his royal throne in the citadel of Susa, and in the 3rd year of his reign, he began a banquet for all his nobles and officials, the military leaders of Persia and Media, the princes, and the nobles of the provinces were present. For a full 180 days, he displayed the vast wealth of his kingdom and the splendor and glory of his majesty. When these days were over, the king gave a banquet lasting 7 days in the enclosed garden of the king's palace for all the people who, from the least to the greatest, who were in the citadel of Susa. The garden had hangings of white and blue linen, fastened with cords of white linen and purple material to silver rings on marble pillars. There were couches of gold and silver on a mosaic pavement of porphyry, marble, mother of pearl, and other costly stones. Wine was served in goblets of gold, each one different from the other, and the royal wine was abundant, in keeping with the king's liberality. I think that's how you pronounce it. I'm not sure. I'm just gonna go with it. By the way, by the king's command, each guest was allowed to drink in his own way. For the king instructed all the wine stewards to serve each man what he wished. Queen Vashti also gave a banquet for the women in the royal palace of King Xerxes. On the 7th day, when King Xerxes was in high spirits from wine, he commanded the seven who served him to bring before the Queen Vashti, wearing her royal crown, in order to display her beauty to the people and nobles, for she was lovely to look at. But when the attendants delivered the king's command, Queen Vashti refused to come. Then the king became furious and burned with anger. Since it was customary for the king to consult experts in the matters of law and justice, he spoke with the wise men who understood the times and were closest to the king. The 7 nobles of Persia and Media who had special access to the king and were highest in the kingdom. According to the law, what must be done to Queen Vashti, he asked. She has not obeyed the command of King Xerxes that they have given her. Then they replied in the presence of the king and the nobles, Queen Vashti has done wrong, not only against the king, but also against against all the nobles and the people of all the provinces of Xerxes. For the queen's conduct will become known to all the women, and so they will despise their husbands and say, King Xerxes commanded Queen Vashti to be brought before him, but she would not come. This very day, the Persian and Median women of the nobility who have heard about the queen's conduct will respond to all the king's nobles in the same way. There will be no end of disrespect and discord. Therefore, it pleases the king. Let him issue a royal decree, and let it be written in the laws of Persia and Media, which cannot be repealed, that Vashti is never again to enter the presence of King Xerxes. Also, let the king give her royal position to someone else who is better than she. Then, when the king's edict is proclaimed throughout his vast realm, all the women will respect their husbands, from the least to the greatest. The king and his nobles were pleased with this advice. So the king did as they proposed. He sent dispatches to all parts of the kingdom, to each province in its own script, and to each people in its own language, proclaiming in each people's tongue that every man should be ruler over his own household. So again, we are reading the book of Esther. Just in case you're joining me for the first time, or if you're someone who's a recurring guest, I wanted to let you all know that we're reading out of the book of Esther, and we're talking about assertiveness tonight. So we're about to enter into chapter 2, where Esther is being made queen. So I hope you all are listening. Later, when the anger of King Xerxes has subsided, he remembered Vashti and what she had done, and what he decreed about her. Then the king's personal attendants proposed, let a search be made for beautiful young virgins for the king. Let the king appoint commissioners in every province of his realm to bring all these beautiful girls into harem at the citadel of Susa. Let them be placed under the care of Haggai, the king's eunuch, who is in charge of the women, and let beauty treatments be given to them. Then let the girl who pleases the king be queen instead of Vashti. This advice appealed to the king, and he followed it. Now there was in the citadel of the Susa a Jew of the tribe of Benjamin named Mordecai, son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, who had been carried into exile from Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, among those taken captive with the king of Judah. Mordecai had a cousin named Hadassah, whom he had brought up because she had neither father nor mother. This girl, who was also known as Esther, was lovely in the form and features, and Mordecai had taken her as his own daughter when her father and mother died. When the king's order and edict had been proclaimed, many girls were brought to the citadel of Susa and put under the care of Haggai. Esther also was taken to the king's palace and entrusted to Haggai, who had charge of the harem. The girl pleased him and won his favor. Immediately he provided her with beauty treatments and special food. He assigned to her 7 maids selected from the king's palace and moved her and her maids into the best place, into the harem. Esther had not revealed her nationality and family background because Mordecai had forbidden her to do so. Every day he walked back and forth near the courtyard of the harem to find out how Esther was and what was happening to her. Before a girl's turn came to go into King Xerxes, she had to complete 12 months of beauty treatments prescribed for the oil, 6 months with oil of myrrh, and 6 with perfumes and cosmetics. That's a lot. And this is how she would go to the king. Anything she wanted was given to her to take with her from the harem to the king's palace. And in the evening, she would go there, and in the morning return to another part of the harem to the care of the king's eunuch, who was in charge of the concubines. She would not return to the king unless he was pleased with her and summoned her by name. When the turn came for Esther to go to the king, she asked for nothing other than what Haggai, the king's eunuch, who was in charge of the harem, suggested. And Esther won the favor of everyone who saw her. She was taken to King Xerxes in the royal residence in the 10th month, the month of Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. Now the king was attracted to Esther more than any of the other women, and she won his favor and approval more than any of the other virgins. So he had set a royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. And the king gave a great banquet, Esther's banquet, for all his nobles and officials. He proclaimed a holiday throughout the provinces and distributed gifts with royal liberality. Mordecai uncovers a conspiracy. So this is a second in a separate section in the second chapter of the book of Esther. When the virgins were assembled the second time, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, but Esther had kept secret her family background and nationality, just as Mordecai had told her to do, for she continued to follow Mordecai's instructions as she had done when he was bringing her up. During the time Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, two of the king's officers who guarded the doorway became angry and conspired to assassinate King Xerxes. But Mordecai found out about the plot and told Queen Esther, who in turn reported it to the king, giving credit to Mordecai. And when the report was investigated and found to be true, the two officials were hanged on the gallows. And this was recorded in the book of Annuals in the presence of the king. So before we continue on to the third chapter of the book of Esther, I wanted to unpack this a little bit and talk about what we've read so far. So we have a young girl, we have Queen Esther, who was appointed and who was called in order to become the King Xerxes' queen. Now, again, Esther is a very, very young girl who was very green and kind of naive to a lot of things. I think that it's important for us to understand that she didn't know what to expect when she entered into the role of queen. She recognized how prestigious this was. She recognized how powerful this position was, but she didn't really know what to expect. She kind of walked into this role as a queen blindsided, and she didn't really understand what her purpose was. But I think that this is a coming of age story for her because it taught her how to stand up for herself. In the third chapter, we're about to learn about Haman's plot to destroy the Jews, but I think that the lack of pride that she had in the first and second chapter about who she was, and the fact that she felt uncomfortable and had no sense of confidence in who she was in her role as queen. She had a very, very hard time adapting. She really wasn't even interested in becoming Queen Esther and becoming King Xerxes' queen. She was ordered to do this because he had issued an edict in the kingdom, well, in the town, saying that, each and every girl, each and every young lady had to be summoned to the king so that he could choose his queen. But she didn't understand what her purpose was. She didn't understand how valuable she was. She didn't understand what was going on or how she was supposed to serve in this role. So I think that when we learn about Haman's plot to destroy the Jews, which are the people that Mordecai, it's a part of Mordecai and Esther's family background, I think it's important for us to understand that, Haman's plot to destroy the Jews definitely brought out Esther's true character in terms of figuring out what to do and standing up for the people that she loved and cared about, and just being proud of her background, being proud of who she was as a young lady, and being proud of her role as a queen. I think that that's what she recognized, and that's what she learned along the way. She came into it, like I said, very, very blindsided. She was very green and naive to a lot of things. But I think that before I continue, I should say, I think it's important for us to understand that, assertiveness is something that we are going to talk about tonight. And it simply means having or showing a confident and forceful personality. Now, that's what the Oxford Dictionary states. But I think that people have a hard time standing up for themselves because they don't understand the difference between being assertive and speaking up for themselves and what aggression looks like when you do that. Now, I think that it's important for us to understand that when, in terms of talking about the book of Esther, we're talking about assertiveness. So we're talking about what it looks like when we stand up for ourselves and when we stand up for what we believe in, or if we stand up in order to defend our families or to defend our friends and people we love and care about. I think that when we talk about assertiveness, we have to understand that assertiveness comes from a place of love, self-love, and self-respect. But the respect and love for yourself can also transcend into your relationships with others. It puts up boundaries. It lets people know what's acceptable and what's not acceptable when you assert yourself and when you speak up for yourself. You feel so much better about yourself. But I think that it's important for us to understand that assertiveness and aggression aren't the same thing. Aggression is more about fear and control. And that's one thing that those are some things that Esther did not display in her personality. She was never aggressive. She was very timid, very shy, very scared to make waves, and very scared to call people out when she saw that they were doing wrong. And I think that her assertiveness was tested throughout the course of this passage. The ability for her to stand up for herself and to display confidence as Queen Esther is what she struggled with. Now, I'm going to continue on to chapter 3 so we can learn about a little bit more about Haman's plot to destroy the Jews and how Esther found the courage to stand up for her people, and not just for Mordecai, her cousin, but also for the Jews in general. After these events, King Xerxes honored Haman, elevating him and giving him a seat of honor higher than that of the other nobles. All the royal officials at the king's gate knelt down and paid honor to Haman, for the king had commanded this concerning him, but Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor. Then the royal officials at the king's gate asked Mordecai, "Why do you disobey the king's command?" Day after day they spoke to him, but he refused to comply. Therefore they told Haman about it to see whether Mordecai's behavior would be tolerated, for he had told them he was a Jew. When Haman saw that Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor, he was enraged. Yet having learned who Mordecai's people were, he scorned the idea of killing only Mordecai. Instead, Haman looked for a way to destroy all Mordecai's people, the Jews, throughout the whole kingdom of Xerxes. In the 12th year of King Xerxes, in the first month, the month of Nisan, they cast the pur, that is the lot, in the presence of Haman to select a day and month. And the lot fell on a 12th month, the month of Adar. Then Haman said to King Xerxes, "There is a certain people dispersed and scattered among the people in all the provinces of your kingdom, whose customs are different from those of all other people, and who did not obey the king's laws. It is not in the king's best interest to tolerate them." Just be mindful, everybody. I'm reading from the New International Version, so it's easier for me to understand the New Living Translation and the New International Version. But I just wanted you all to know that this is an NIV Bible, so that's what I'm reading from. But I know that it's kind of hard to interpret depending on what you're reading from, but I just want you all to just be aware of that while I'm reading. If it pleases the king, let a decree be issued to destroy them, and I will put 10,000 talents of silver into the royal treasure for the men who carry out this business. So the king took his signet ring from his finger and gave it to Haman, the enemy of the Jews. "Keep the money," the king said to Haman, "and do with the people as you please." Then on the 13th day of the first month, the royal secretaries were summoned. They wrote out in the script of each province and in the language of each people all Haman's orders to the king's satraps, the governors of the various provinces, and the nobles of the various peoples. These were written in the name of King Xerxes himself and sealed with his own ring. Dispatches were sent by couriers to all the king's provinces with the order to destroy, kill, and annihilate all the Jews, young and old, women and little children, on a single day, the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, and to plunder their goods. A copy of the text of the edict will be issued as law in every province and made known to the people of every nationality so they would be ready for that day. Spurred on by the king's command, the couriers went out, and the edict was issued in the citadel, of Susa. The king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Susa was bewildered. So again, this is Haman's plot to kill the Jews, and this is the plan that he's orchestrating in order to seek revenge against Mordecai for not bowing down to him. Now, what Haman doesn't realize in this passage is that Esther, Queen Esther, King Xerxes' queen, is also a Jew. He's blinded by his own rage. He's blinded by his own anger, and he doesn't realize how much trouble he's getting himself into when he tricks the king into making this edict a decree for all of the people that he oversees. Now we're about to read the chapter where Mordecai persuades Esther to help out with this entire thing. And this is the chapter that we are going to read about. And this is the chapter where we realize that Esther uses her position of authority in order to make a difference and to save the people that she loved. This forced her outside of her comfort zone, and this forced her to open up verbally and to speak out about what she knew was wrong. And this is just a message to us to never be afraid to do what's right. I think that Esther learned that throughout the process, that it doesn't matter what circumstance you may be in. It doesn't matter which title that you hold. It doesn't matter what kind of status you have or what kind of status you think that you have. If you're in the position to make a difference and to stand up for what's right, it's nothing to fear. There's no fear in that. And I think that that's what Esther learned here, because she was always afraid of looking like the bad person. I think that Queen Esther was a girl who was very, very kind, very, very gentle, but a girl that didn't want to make any waves. She didn't want to upset people. She didn't want to make people mad. She didn't want to look like the bad guy. But she soon learned that that was not important, as important as she thought it was, and that assertiveness is what saved her people. Assertiveness was a representation of how much she loves her people and of how much she loves herself with everything that she does, and even with how she carries herself as a young lady. I think that that's what we have to learn, and that's what we have to remember, and that's what we learn as we read this passage. When Mordecai learned of all that had been done, he tore his clothes, put on the sackcloth and ashes, and went out into the city, wailing loudly and bitterly. But he went only as far as the king's gate, because no one clothed in sackcloth was allowed to enter it. In every province to which the edict and order of the king came, there was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting, weeping, and wailing. Many lay in sackcloth and ashes. When Esther's maids and eunuchs came and told her about Mordecai, she was in great distress. She sent clothes for him to put on instead of his sackcloth, but he would not accept them. Then Esther summoned one of the king's eunuchs assigned to attend to her and ordered him to find out what was troubling Mordecai. But I'm going to skip to the part where he begs her to help out and to use her position in order to save the people. When Esther's words were reported to Mordecai, he sent back this answer. He says, "Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance from the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to royal position for such a time as this." So I think that is profound to say. I think that statement in this section of the reading is important, because we understand that Mordecai is persuading Esther to help, and he's trying to get her to understand what her purpose is for becoming King Xerxes' queen. He's trying to get her to understand why it was important for her to be called to that position and to use that authority for the right reasons. And she is trying to understand the full scope of the problem. She's trying to look at it from his point of view, and she's trying to figure out what to do. And it's somewhat overwhelming for her because she had never been put in the position as such before to make these types of decisions and to be the enforcer. But he's trying to get her to understand that. And that's what this specific piece of the text is talking about. And that's why I skipped a little. I wanted you all to really learn that and really understand that, because I think that we're all put in positions too. I think that this is just a practical example of what that looks like when we're put in a position to make a difference and to speak up for what we believe in, because so many people are afraid to do it, and everyone does not have the courage to do that. But I think that when we stick to what's right and when we speak up for ourselves, we always get rewarded in some way or another. And that's what she looks for, and that's what she does. Then Esther sent his reply to Mordecai. This reply to Mordecai: Go, gather together all the Jews who are in Susa, and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my maids will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went away and carried out all of Esther's instructions. And again, chapter 5 talks a lot about Esther's request to the king. And she is demonstrating bravery when she goes to the king, even though it's against the law. It was against the law at the time to do that without being summoned to the king. She made that sacrifice for her people because she was able to demonstrate that love and care that she had for them. On the third day, Esther put on her royal robes and stood into the inner court of the palace in front of the king's hall. The king was sitting on his royal throne in the hall, facing the entrance. When he saw Queen Esther standing in the court, he was pleased with her and held out to her the gold scepter that was in his hand. So Esther approached and touched the tip of the scepter, I should say. Then the king asked, What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be given to you. If it pleases the king, replied Esther, let the king together with Haman come today to a banquet I have prepared for him. Bring Haman at once, the king said, so that we may do what Esther asks. So the king and Haman went to the banquet Esther had prepared. As they were drinking wine, the king again asked Esther, Now what is your petition? It will be given to you. And what is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be granted. Esther replied, My petition and my request is this. If the king regards me with favor, and if it pleases the king to grant my petition and fulfill my request, let the king and Haman come tomorrow to the banquet I will prepare for them. Then I will answer the king's question. Now we're going to learn more about Mordecai's rage against Haman's rage against Mordecai. Now, I may not be able to get to each and every portion of this text because of time constraints, but I will do my best to try to bring this lesson around. So Haman went out that day happy and in high spirits, but when he saw Mordecai at the king's gate and observed that he neither rose nor showed fear in his presence, he was filled with rage against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home. Calling together his friends, his wife, and Zeresh, his wife, Haman boasted to them about his vast wealth, his many sons, and all the ways the king had honored him, and how he had elevated him above the other nobles and officials. And that's not all, Haman added. I'm the only person Queen Esther invited to accompany the king to the banquet she gave, and she has invited me along with the king tomorrow. But all this gives me no satisfaction as long as I see that Jew Mordecai sitting at the king's gate. His wife Zeresh and all his friends said to him, Have a gallows built 75 feet high and ask the king in the morning to have Mordecai hanged on it. Then go with the king to the dinner and be happy. This suggestion delighted Haman, and he had the gallows built. That night the king could not sleep, so he ordered the book of Chronicles, the record of his reign, to be brought in and read to him. It was found recorded there that Mordecai had exposed the two of the king's officers who guarded the doorway, who had conspired to assassinate King Xerxes. What honor and recognition has Mordecai received for this? The king asked. Nothing has been done for him, his attendants answered. The king said, who is in the court? Now Haman had just entered into the outer court of the palace to speak to the king about hanging Mordecai on the gallows he had erected for him. His attendants answered, Haman is standing in the court. Bring him in. The king ordered. When Haman entered, the king asked, what should be done for the man the king delights to honor? Now Haman thought to himself, who is there that the king would rather honor than me? So he answered, yes, thank you, Miss Deborah Thomas, for tuning in. I really appreciate you for tuning in. Thanks again for leaving that comment below. So he answered the king, for this man the king delights to honor. Have them bring a robe the king has worn and a horse the king has ridden, one with a royal crest placed on its head. Then the robe and the horse be entrusted to one of the king's most noble princes. Let them robe the man the king delights to honor and lead him on the horse through the city streets, proclaiming before him, this is what is done for the man the king delights to honor. Go at once, the king commanded Haman. Get the robe and the horse and do just as you have suggested for Mordecai the Jew, who sits at the king's gate. Do not neglect anything you have recommended. So Haman got the robe and the horse. He robed Mordecai and led him on the horse back through the city streets, proclaiming before him, this is what is done for the man that the king delights to honor. Afterwards, Mordecai returned to the king's gate, but Haman rushed home with his head covered in grief and told Zeresh, his wife, and all his friends everything that had happened to him. His advisors and his wife Zeresh said to him, since Mordecai, before whom your downfall has started, is of Jewish origin, you cannot stand against him. You will surely come to ruin. While they were still talking with him, the king's eunuchs arrived and hurried Haman away to the banquet Esther had prepared. Okay, so before we continue, this is the turning point of the story. This is the turning part of the passage. This is the part of the passage where Haman is about to get in some deep trouble for lying to the king, lying to King Xerxes, and plotting to kill the Jews here in the Bible. Not only Mordecai, but also Queen Esther. What Haman failed to realize throughout the course of him plotting and scheming and lying was that Queen Esther was a Jew as well. He let his rage get the best of him because he let the power, the fact that King Xerxes appointed him as his right-hand man, he let that get to his head. Now, how often do people let power get to their heads when they get elevated? Let's just give a practical example and talk about the workplace. When people let certain positions, as they get elevated and as they move up the career ladder, when people let their status get to their head, why is it that they feel as though people need to, in a way, bow down to them and kiss up to them in order to get ahead or in order to get what they want? That's what we're looking at right here. Haman was upset and enraged because Mordecai didn't do what he wanted him to do. He didn't bow down to him and he didn't show him the respect that he felt as though he deserved. But this is where we're seeing Haman's character and how his leadership is not there. It was never there. We're learning about how Haman, what's the word I'm looking for? The lack of integrity and the lack of character from Haman is what we're seeing and what we're reading about right now. We're recognizing who the true leaders are through tough times. I think that is important for us to realize what that looks like, because so many people let status get to their heads. So many people let their anger get the best of them. But I think that, again, when we talk about Mordecai and when we talk about Esther, I think that they're both leaders. We have to remember that Esther learned from Mordecai. Mordecai was Esther's mentor. Mordecai was like a father figure to Esther when both of her parents passed away. She was a very, very young girl. She needed guidance. She needed direction. And Mordecai, her cousin, who acted as that father figure, was there to guide her and there to instruct her on what to do. But now she's in the position to go to King Xerxes for herself because Mordecai was not in the position to do what she was in the position to do. But he was able to give her those tools and those resources so that she could flourish and prosper from there. So that's what we're about to learn about. That's what we're about to read about. So the king and Haman went to dine with Queen Esther, and as they were drinking wine on that second day, the king again asked Queen Esther, "What is your petition? It will be given to you. What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be granted." Then Queen Esther answered, "If I have found favor with you, O king, and if it pleases your majesty, grant me my life. This is my petition, and spare my people. This is my request, for I and my people have been sold for destruction and slaughter and annihilation. If we had been sold as male and female slaves, I would have kept quiet because no such distress would justify disturbing the king." King Xerxes asked Queen Esther, "Who is he? Where is the man who has dared to do such a thing?" Esther said, "The adversary and enemy is the vile Haman." Then Haman was terrified before the king and queen. The king got up in a rage, left his wine, and went out into the palace garden. But Haman, realizing that the king had already decided his fate, stayed behind to beg Queen Esther, for his life. Just as the king returned from the palace garden to the banquet hall, Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was reclining. The king exclaimed, "Will he even do such a thing to the queen while she is with me in the house?" And as soon as the word left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. Then Harbona, one of the eunuchs attending the king, said, "A gallows 75 feet high stands by Haman's house. He had made for Mordecai, who spoke up to help the king." The king said, "Hang him on it." So they hanged Haman on the gallows he had prepared for Mordecai. Then the king's fury subsided. Then the king created a new edict on behalf of the Jews that we're about to read about. And again, good people always prosper. That's what that part of the passage is telling us. Esther, again, that was her moment where she had the courage to stand up for herself. She demonstrated so much bravery when she spoke up for herself. Doing the right thing will always, always get you through, and that will always save you in the very end. And that's what we learned about in this portion of the passage. This is what saved Esther and her people. This is what saved Mordecai. This is what saved the rest of her family. This is a part of her. This is her nationality. This is her family background. This is her heritage. This is everything that she is outside of being a queen. Esther realized that, and she did whatever it took in order to make that sacrifice for her people. And that's what we all have to do as Christians. That's what we all have to do in this life. It's important for us to stand up for ourselves when we see that things are wrong. A lot of people like to go along just to get along. A lot of people don't want to make waves. They want to be people pleasers. But I think that it's important for us to understand that Queen Esther, in the beginning, was afraid to make waves and to call people out for their wrongdoings. But Mordecai, her cousin, and her father figure helped her understand that being a people pleaser wasn't going to save her people. Being a people pleaser is what was going to get everyone assassinated. All of the Jews assassinated. All of the Jews removed and killed and just wiped out from the entire land. Being a people pleaser is not what was going to save her people. Being assertive and being bold was supposed to save her people, and is what did save her people. That same day, King Xerxes gave Queen Esther the estate of Haman, the enemy of the Jews, and Mordecai came into the presence of the king, for Esther had told how he was related to her. The king took off his signet ring, which he had reclaimed from Haman, and presented it to Mordecai, and Esther appointed him over Haman's estate. Esther again pleaded with the king, falling at his feet and weeping. She even begged him to put an end to the evil plan of Haman, the Agagite, which he had devised against the Jews. Then the king extended the gold scepter to Esther, and she arose and stood before him. If it pleases the king, she said, and if he regards me with the favor and thinks it the right thing to do, and if he is pleased with me, let an order be written overruling the dispatches that Haman devised and wrote to destroy the Jews in all the king's provinces. For how can I bear to see the distress fall on my people? How can I bear to see the destruction of my family? King Xerxes replied to Queen Esther and to Mordecai the Jew, because Haman attacked the Jews, I have given his estate to Esther, and they have hanged him on the gallows. Now write another decree in the king's name in behalf of the Jews, as seems best to you, and seal it with the king's signet ring, for no document written in the king's name and sealed with his ring can be revoked. At once the royal secretaries were summoned on the 23rd day of the third month, the month of Sivan. They wrote out all Mordecai's orders to the Jews and to the satraps, governors, and nobles of the 127 provinces stretching from India to Kush. These orders were written in the script of each province and the language of each people, and also to the Jews in their own script and language. Mordecai wrote in the name of the king Xerxes, sealed the dispatches with the king's signet ring, and sent them by mounted couriers who rode fast horses, especially bred for the king. The king's edict granted the Jews in every city the right to assemble and protect themselves, to destroy, kill, and annihilate any armed force of any nationality or province that might attack them and their women and children, and to plunder the property of their enemies. The day appointed for the Jews to do this in all the provinces of King Xerxes was the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar. The copy of the text of the edict was to be issued as law in every province and made known to the people of every nationality, so that the Jews would be ready on that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. Their couriers riding the royal horses raced out, spurred on by the king's command, and the edict was also issued in the citadel of Susa. Mordecai left the king's presence wearing garments of blue and white, a large crown of gold, and a purple robe of fine linen. And the city of Susa held a joyous celebration. For the Jews, it was a time of happiness and joy, gladness and honor. In every province and in every city, wherever the edict of the king went, there was joy and gladness among the Jews, with feasting and celebrating. And many people of other nationalities became Jews because fear of the Jews had seized them. I think that's very powerful. I think that's very profound. And again, I can reiterate that doing the right thing always leaves you in a good spot at the end. I think that it's important for us to realize that Queen Esther became the queen. And I think that she understood her role after she stood up for herself. She didn't really, in the beginning, she really didn't understand what her role as queen was. She was very unfamiliar with that role. She didn't even know what that position was. She didn't realize that being a queen wasn't just about looking pretty and just having a title. She recognized how important it was to be bold and how to be classy and respectful. I think that when she revealed to King Xerxes what his right-hand man, Haman's plans were, she felt better about herself. It was like a new dose of confidence just went right through her. I mean, I think that when we read this text, we can feel that and we can see this story just playing out. I think that it's important for us to realize that Mordecai, he remained modest this entire time. He didn't brag or boast about his achievements. He let God, even though God's not mentioned at all in this book, I think that it's important for us to realize that Mordecai let God do his thing. He let God work in the way that he worked. Mordecai did not brag or boast about any of his achievements that he had made, not just as a Jew, but just in general, being the man who he was, being the father figure that he was to Queen Esther. I think that it's important for us to realize that he had earned his title at the very end. He had earned the right to be a part of the palace, of the king's palace. of King Xerxes' palace. He knew how to stand up for what was right and what was wrong. He knew how to keep his morals and religious grounds, well, his religion and his morals grounded. He knew how to keep himself grounded. He did not let anything entice him to do anything that was wrong. He remained modest and he demonstrated humility the entire time. And I think that that's what we all need. Everybody needs humility. Everyone needs to lean on God for guidance and direction, especially during times like these where we are in a position to make an impact and to save the people that we love, when we're in the position to stand up for what's right and not afraid to challenge what's wrong. I think a lot of people are afraid to challenge what's wrong because they don't want to look like the bad guy. They don't want to look like the person who is against everybody. We have to realize that when we stand up for ourselves, it stems from a place of love and respect, not just of ourselves, but for others. Being assertive is not about being aggressive. It's not about starting trouble. It's not even about creating conflicts between people. Standing up for yourself is all about love and respect, not just for you, but for the people around you. I think that Queen Esther was too concerned in the beginning about what other people thought. So many people are concerned about the opinions of others. So many people are concerned about, excuse me. So many people are concerned about the opinions of others that they are afraid to challenge what's wrong because they're scared of what the consequences may be. They may lose friendships. They may lose connections. They may lose more than what they think that they need. But when we stand up for what's right, we always come out on the other side of it stronger and better than ever. But if we stay silent, we miss out on so many opportunities that God has for us. I think that, again, Queen Esther learned that being a queen was not about, again, looking pretty and just holding a title. It was about being bold and about displaying confidence, not arrogance, but confidence, not just in what she believed in and for who she was, but also for her foundation as a young lady. So I think that it's important for us to realize as we close out the show, we're almost finished the show. Oh, it went by quickly. I was reading all that time. It went by quickly. We have a few minutes left in the show, but I want to leave you all with this thought that the lesson that I'm trying to get to you all tonight is that, being assertive and being bold and standing up for what's right is important in all aspects of your life. Whether you're at school, whether you're in the workplace, whether you're at home, displaying that self-confidence and standing up for what's right and challenging what is wrong, not just going along just to get along, but challenging what is wrong is so important. You demonstrate so much more self-respect when you put these boundaries up, when you establish the boundaries, and when you show people and tell people what is and is not acceptable, not only for you, but for the people that you love. So many people want to fit in, but it only makes you a follower when you just fit in and when you don't stand up for yourself or for others. People often shy away from that because, again, they want to fit in and they're more concerned about themselves. They have a me-focused attitude, but it's not always about us. Sometimes being bold and being assertive is supposed to help others. It's not just supposed to be me-focused. It's not just supposed to bless us. Sometimes we're supposed to bless others through being assertive and for standing up for what's right. So Queen Esther realized at the end that, being assertive wasn't so bad after all. It wasn't unladylike to be bold. It was not unladylike to stand up for what I believed in. That's what Queen Esther learned at the very end. And again, Mordecai, his influence and his guidance and his direction, him being a mentor for her, being that father figure for her is what helped her stay grounded. That's what helped her create her foundation as a young lady when her parents passed away, as she stepped into this new role. So my question that I want to leave for you guys tonight is, what role has God called you to? And what are you doing in order to prepare for that role? What are you doing to prepare for that role that God has called you to? Are you familiar with the role? And if not, what can you do to familiarize with yourself with what's to come? Are you in the position to stand up for what you believe in? And are you in a position to be bold when everyone else is not afraid to be bold? Are you willing to make that sacrifice for your family, for your friends, and for the people that you love in order to save them and to protect them and to keep them? It's so sacred, but it's something that people often take for granted because we don't miss what we have until it's gone, and until we don't have a second chance to reconciliate or to change things that have happened. So we all have to understand that, and we all have to keep that in mind. So within the few minutes that we have left in the broadcast, I want to thank you all again. I'm putting my glasses back on. Excuse the glare. Thanks again for tuning in to another edition of the Beauty in Us Radio right here on Awesome God Radio. I hope you all enjoyed another edition of the show. Next week, we will have our first guest that we've had in the last couple of months, in the last 2 months, I should say, Mr. Tommy Durrell, one of the gentlemen that I work with from Young Men Strong LLC. Shout out to Miss Nija Howard, CEO and founder of Young Men Strong. Mr. Tommy Durrell will be joining us next week on November 9th from 6:30 to 7 p.m. Eastern Time, from 5:30 to 6 p.m. his time. He's from Louisiana, so he's a country boy. He's going to be joining us to talk about the work that he does with Young Men Strong. He's one of my mentors with Young Men Strong, which is an organization that I've joined and I've been a junior mentee of for the past few months. And he's going to talk a lot about his story. He lives in Texas. He has a young son who I believe is 10 years old, and he's a mentor for Young Men Strong, who I think that you all will hear a lot from. I think that his story is very, very impactful, and I think that he has a lot to bring to the table, not just for Young Men Strong, but for you guys as well. He's been great with all of our panel discussions each Friday. We have another one this Friday. So he'll be joining us next week on November 9th from 6:30 to 7 p.m. Eastern Time and from 5:30 to 6 p.m. his time. So I'll be posting the content and more information about that show, next week's show, on Friday, so that you all can get familiar with him and learn a little bit more about him before next week's show. So he's pretty cool. So I hope you all enjoy it. So he's from Louisiana, but he lives in Texas. So he's country boy all the way. So I can't wait for you all to tune into another edition of the Beauty in Us Radio right here on Awesome God Radio. Don't forget to subscribe to Awesome God Radio. So you can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Twitch, and all of the other social media platforms. And don't forget to follow me, Nelson E. Brown. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram as well. All of the social media platforms. So feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or concerns, or if you have something great to bring to this show and to this broadcast. I'll be happy to speak with you, and I'll be happy to book you for a slot on my show. So I encourage you all to cherish these lessons. I've been facilitating these lessons for the past few weeks. And I don't know about you all, but I definitely feel encouraged, and I feel inspired, and I feel uplifted each and every time. So I love you all, and I appreciate you all, and I hope you all have a great November. I hope you all continue to stay safe. We have to remember that we're still in the middle of the pandemic. I hope all of the children, all of the young people like myself who are in school and who are trying to get their education in the midst of all of the traumatic things that are happening in the world and in the middle of a pandemic and in the middle of this crisis, I pray that you all continue to stay focused. I pray for each and every parent. I pray for each and every person in this community and each and every individual that may be struggling with something. I pray for each and every family who may be going through hard times. So we all have to stick together, and we all have to continue to work together and stand hand in hand in order to move forward and to do what God has called us to do. So I hope the book of Esther and the story of Esther has helped you grow and learn from this. So I love you all, and I appreciate you all, and I hope to see you all next week. Take care. Bye-bye.